All right. So, night school.
Night school.
So, today we're going to talk about the ending of Cosmos and Psyche. We've been reading this book for 3 months.
You have been reading this book for 3 months. I read this book for 2 months. I
Yeah.
quit. I made it about halfway.
More, 3/4.
No way, not 3/4, because we did it in 3 parts, and I wasn't even ready for the second part.
Okay, half. Yeah.
Okay, so half. So I
Yeah.
read half of this book. It was so much data.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's, I guess if you haven't seen the other episodes, it's a book about astrology, and it's a book about Richard Tarnas, the author, analyzing times in the past that have lined up with certain alignments of planets, and he's giving evidence for the fact that like there seems to be some sort of link between what's going on in the skies and what's going on here in civilization or just in society and people, or even in particular people's lives if it's based on something to do with their birth rather than the current state of the earth, basically.
Mm-hmm.
um, the last few chapters that we had read, because we read parts 1 through 6 up through the previous episode, and you had gotten through, I think, some of the 3 parts from that one. Um, and then yeah, after that we just decided because we were both. This book is really. It's like I think it's slowed down our output for sure because it's been so
Right.
difficult to get through because it's not always that exciting, even though the knowledge that I've gleaned from this book is exciting to me when I think about the world and when I think about like the nature of reality now. It is
Yeah.
exciting that I know some of the stuff that I know from this, but getting through it has been a slog because it's mountains of evidence of like here's all these times that it's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And the last
It has been super enriching to my life to not just to incorporate this new information into my worldview and just think, wow, how amazing is it that something so small can align with the movement of something so large.
Mhm.
And there's some sort of common thread going through reality on
Yeah.
these multiple levels. It's so fascinating. It's like a trip, it's like an actual trip to sit back and think about it and just look at it in your imagination.
Totally.
Go, wow, things can really work like that.
Yeah.
And you got me a Christmas present, a really detailed
Yeah.
breakdown of my natal chart. I read the whole thing yesterday,
Yeah?
and it was so beneficial.
Huh.
It made me feel so loved and seen to read all this information about me that resonates so much, and it helps me have more accurate expectations for myself. There were things in it that I didn't agree with that'll just go in one ear and out the other, but 90% of it, it's like, yeah, this is useful and relevant.
Mhm.
I think I used to read stuff like that and say, well, this is just stuff that applies to everybody. But
Right.
then again, people tend to think that everybody is the same as them because they don't understand the dynamics of personality, how
Sure.
complex it is.
Yeah.
So there's something, you become so much more aware of how other people work when you realize that you're a 4. If there's 9 personalities, you are a 4, and that's a distinct version of personality. And there's also ones that work totally different than you. Then you realize not only what you are, but what you are in relation to other people. It gives you such a better self-awareness.
Totally.
So I think I used to read it and be like, well, this applies to everybody. But then again, I used to assume everybody thought the way that I did, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been enriching and useful and helpful and fascinating and boring.
Right. Yeah. And that natal chart that we had done for Christmas, that was like, because there's many different ways that you can interpret a natal chart, and that's one view of it. And so certain aspects of it might not be entirely true. I was gonna like qualify the statement true, um, but like it might not resonate with you. Some of it might not be the way that you would interpret it or the way that it actually is. And also, we learned after we had bought it that kind of what that is. Oh wait, no, it was before that we bought it, but kind of what that one that we paid for, because there's a lot of different services you could go through. That one's like it's like a machine that puts it together, but then like a
Yeah.
person kind of edits it and like rearranges it so that it's actually legible and like here's an order in which you could read this, and it gives more of a narrative that is actually going to make any sense to you.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you got what the machine put out, it would be nonsense
Yeah.
just because it would be as intimidating as trying to read this book because there'd be so much weird language and stuff. But
Right.
yeah.
But it wasn't actually personalized. Like the paragraphs are like, if you've been married, this might affect you this way. If you haven't, this way. So it's
Okay.
like it's not actually personalized. I don't know, what was the service called that you used?
I'd have to look it up, but it was through Etsy, so it was like an
Oh,
Etsy
cool.
seller that was doing it.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of Etsy sellers that basically do natal
Sweet.
charts.
Yeah. I would recommend the service to a friend. I would get the service for a friend as a present too
Nice.
after using it.
Yeah.
But it was advertised as being personalized, wasn't really so. But it was cool.
It may be that it kind of was though, in that like maybe the specific grouping of paragraphs that you got was different from like because it wasn't as though they have 9 reports that they send out. It's like they have 9 of one paragraph is divided by 9, but like there's other paragraphs that are totally a separate assignment based on like where each planet was in the sky or whatever. But
Yeah.
I digress.
Digress, dude.
Let's
do it.
digress.
I fucking dare you to digress.
Yeah. So astrology, yeah, and it's also been good for me in that like part of it makes me like stop when I'm outside at night and look up at the sky for a minute pretty often, just and like thinking about like what's going on up there and like what's my role in this or like what's about to happen next. It's also like I was thinking about this earlier today that it's sort of made me it's kind of a comforting thought that like that there is something going on, and even if I don't know I'm playing my role in it, I'm playing my role in it.
Yeah.
And that like it makes it feel like you can't fail really as much because like you're playing a role and maybe it isn't the role that you like, but like sometimes that's just what it is right now. And it's kind of comforting that it's like there is the notion that there is something intelligent to the way that things are playing out that is beyond me, that I can't, that there's something in the sky that I could read if I was smarter, but I'm not. You'd have to look at it really closely for a really long time until there was no future left to totally understand what's going on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about it in the same way that it's comforting to me that I know theoretically doctors and geneticists and biologists can look into my body and tell me what's going on in there.
Sure.
Like, I don't know, but I know it's structured and orderly and understandable and discernible enough that people get it.
Yeah.
People get how my body works. And so if I really need help, I can ask somebody. And at least it's just not such a whirling ball of chaos inside of me that nobody could ever figure it out.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah.
Like psychology is still.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
like we don't know what the fuck is going on.
Right. The previous chapters that we had read were about Uranus, Pluto, and then Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, Uranus. The one that chapter 7 kind of follows that same sort of pattern, and it follows a fourth conjunction, which is Uranus, Neptune. So Uranus is typically change, rebellion, innovation, that's sort of like the one that we were equating with liberalism even. And then Neptune tends to be involved with transcendence, spirituality, and myth. So a lot of the examples that come up in this part of the book are about like religious rebellions or new religions coming forth, or in personal natal charts it tends to be like maybe points in a person's life where they have a spiritual emergency, or they have some sort of a God experience where they sense a oneness or something like that. Those things were very much a through line with all these sort of conjunctions and alignments that happen with Uranus, Neptune. So, like we've talked about, going through all the evidence isn't the most interesting stuff. So I'll just share a couple of them here. And the Uranus, Neptune, the cycle takes 172 years. So that 15-degree conjunction, like when they're within 15 degrees of alignment, that is 14 to 19 years. So they're fairly long periods of time that these happen. From 412 to 397, there was, BC, there was a conjunction. And this was when Socrates did his most influential teaching. This is when he was working in Athens, which I suppose is where he was doing most of the teaching, although I don't know enough about him to confirm that. But that's also when he was working with Plato, who went on to do his own stuff after Socrates died. And Socrates also did die within that same period.
Wow.
So within that period was when he did most of the teaching that makes us know who he is, and when he taught Plato, which is the reason we know who Plato is, and when he died.
Wow.
Also mentioned was that from 16 to 32, which is when most historians agree is when Jesus did his teaching. So like the Jesus doing his teaching, dying, and the beginning of Christianity, the Christian church after his death, all happened within another. That one was, I believe, actually an alignment, not a conjunction. Or no, sorry, conjunction means alignment. The other one is opposition, right?
Oh, okay.
And I was also thinking about that a little bit because it doesn't really seem like conjunction is a bigger or more important alignment than opposition. At least in the way that it's always discussed here in the book is like those are the two important alignments. And the squares are the second most important, and then it gets less important from there. Which is kind of interesting because you would, like, I guess, like my knee-jerk reaction would be that an alignment is the most important thing, not an opposition. But I was thinking about this today in a way it's the same thing, because it's an alignment of the same three planets. It's really just the idea of it being a conjunction or an opposition. It's just from our point of view. When it's an opposition or when it's a conjunction, we're on one side or the other. When it's an opposition, we're in the middle of it. And I don't know that that makes a lot of difference.
But still, perhaps the energies of both are still passing through us.
Yeah.
And manifesting in our history or our events. Well,
and maybe even.
Do you remember the book saying anything about like, so Neptune plus what is it, Saturn?
Uranus.
Uranus. So Neptune plus your anus in conjunction versus in opposition. Is there a difference? Does the book say that?
It doesn't bring it up at all here. It's just earlier in the book, like chapter 2 or 3, when it was discussing what alignments are, conjunctions, oppositions, squares, and the rest of them, that when it was explaining that, it said that like the conjunction and the opposition were the two most important. But I never got the sense that there was any differentiation afterwards. Like they always just seemed to be discussed as important to each other. And actually, I'm remembering now that what got me onto thinking about this was that the Jesus teaching one was an opposition, whereas the Socrates one was a conjunction. And that got me thinking, like,
of liberalism and mysticism. Like Uranus
Oh,
representing liberalism and Neptune
exactly.
representing mysticism.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are your insights on that?
I was just thinking that if like Jesus's teaching feels like Jesus is the most famous person that we know of, and that whatever alignments would surround his life would be the most important ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so reading that is like, it wasn't even the most important one, but the Socrates was the most important one. But that got me thinking that like, no, it never actually really said that. And it's always just kind of presented them similarly. But it felt for a second like, oh, is this evidence against it not really being totally true? Like if this was totally true, wouldn't everything just be perfect for Jesus's birth because that was such a noteworthy person? But yeah, I don't think that a conjunction is more important than an opposition or more effective.
Well, I'm wondering. I'm not comparing them in significance, but I'm wondering if they have a different quality. Because the way I think about it, and I'm pretty sure this is wrong, is that if they're in conjunction, then events would happen that meant liberalism and mysticism were overlapping in their impact on culture. But if they were in opposition, then events would be happening that represented liberalism and mysticism being at odds at one another.
Maybe.
And their manifestations in culture. That's what I was guessing it would be, but
I haven't heard anything to suggest that.
And Jesus brought what I think was the most significant religion. I don't know if it was the most significant religion in the world, but most significant religion in the Western world. He brought it in a liberal direction. And it seems to me like that's not liberalism and mysticism at odds. Like it seems like he liberalized and mysticized a popular conservative monotheistic religion. So I think I'm wrong.
But I
It
get what
doesn't
you're saying.
sound right, but that's what I was assuming it would be. So
Yeah.
we'll have to
I get
figure
your
that
logic.
out.
Yeah. Something to think about. Those were the ones that I just wanted to share on the basis of like, here's an interesting parallel or an interesting alignment that happened.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few parts that I wanted to read from that chapter that I thought were really interesting for a couple different reasons. They talked a lot about Dante, the guy who wrote Dante's Inferno,
Mm-hmm.
or I think they also refer to it as Divine Comedy, although those might be,
I think it's part of Divine Comedy.
that sounds right, because
Evan knows for
Paradiso,
sure.
yeah, and Paradiso is also a part of it. Paradiso?
Oh,
Or, yeah, yeah. Okay.
What's the third part?
I believe that's the last part.
Paradiso, Inferno, and something something make up the Divine Comedy.
Yeah, I
Cool.
guess so. Wait, why do you think, you sure that there's 3 parts?
Yeah, I don't know where I heard that from.
Okay. Anyway,
But could be wrong.
Dante started his work on the book from
Jamie's pulling it up.
sometime between 1304 and 1308. Most people think it's 1306 that he started working on the book. And he continued working on that book through the entirety of that alignment until his death, apparently, in 1321. And so I don't know exactly. I guess it must have been published posthumously. He was still working on it up until the time that he died, I guess.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradiso.
Yeah. So like hell, purgatory, heaven.
Cool.
Yeah. I wanted to read, this is apparently Dante's climactic mystical epiphany of the divine light and universal omnipresence that happens near the climax of the story. Because the story the book, the way it presented it makes me really interested in going back and reading that book, because it sounds like just an interesting
Which one?
mashup of things. Divine Comedy, just the whole thing.
Oh, the whole. They're like 3 huge books.
Well, maybe I'll wait a
They're
little while on
thumpers,
that.
dude.
But
Anyway.
but it says here, in a vast synthesis of Christian faith, Thomist theology, Neoplatonic philosophy, medieval astronomy and astrology, classical epic, and the courtly troubadour tradition of romantic poetry, all infused with his own mystical gnosis, Dante composed the 100 cantos that climax in the Paradiso with the beatific vision of the Absolute. And I wanted to read that part of the book because I thought it was really
Holy
interesting.
crap, that was a hell of an introduction.
Like I love the way it presents, like, this is all the different shit that this guy was into. He was into, and he also had this own mystical knowledge that people don't really get where he got it
Right.
from.
I want to know what happens when all those maps converge for sure.
Right. And it talks about him at length and like the other, like the ways in which the Uranus Neptune, what's the word? Personality, I guess,
Mhm.
sort of.
Archetypes?
Yeah, just how they present themselves within, particularly this book, which was the most important thing that he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, abounding grace, by which I dared to fix my look on the eternal light so long that I spent all my sight upon it. In its depths I saw that it contained, bound by love in one volume, that which is scattered in leaves through the universe, substances and accidents and their relations as it were fused together in such a way that what I tell of is a simple light. I think I saw the universal form of this complex, because in telling of it I feel my joy expand. Thus my mind, all rapt, was gazing, fixed, still and intent, and ever enkindled with gazing. At that light one becomes such that it is impossible for him ever to consent that he should turn from it to another sight, for the good which is the object of the will is all gathered in it. And this is sort of like a topic that came up a lot in this chapter, was sort of ideas of people realizing that God is everything, or we are all God, or some combination of those ideas. And I feel like that's an idea, like as I read different things, that's an idea I hear more and more,
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of very wise people believe that idea, and it feels I guess increasingly likely in my mind that that's what it is, and that's what the thing is. I really liked that passage. And there was another, actually very similar passage that I wanted to share, and it was. Oh no, did I not put that bookmark in? I think I remember though. I believe it was 389.
I think I'm going to go through a numerology phase.
What do you mean? Oh, just like studying, what do they say? Like magic numbers or spiritual numbers?
They call them angel numbers, but it's so corny because people into numerology will be like, that number's an angel number. But if you Google any number and then the word meaning, the first thing that pops up is angel number, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They're just saying in the angelic language or angelic realm, those numbers represent this quality. And so these are what the numbers mean. If you see a lot of this number, it means this. But like 50% of them say like, this represents you moving in the right direction and your guides are guiding you. It's like, well, that's what guides do. And
right.
Yeah, I mean,
but
so it's kind of funky, but I heard that Brooke sent me some article about Pythagoras being into numerology and believing that certain digits had certain characters and archetypes.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really buy the fact that planets would have certain archetypes or understand why it'd be relevant for me to think that way until we read this. And now I do. So I'm like, shit, maybe numbers have personalities too.
Maybe. And I have been interested in like the Pythagoras stuff too. It's a really interesting idea, or like he is a really interesting character. Like this guy that was so into like numbers and geometry. Like he made up geometry. Like there's a lot of where we get the geometric or mathematical ideas that we have now starts back from him and his followers.
It's crazy.
And I'm really interested in that idea that like I heard someone, maybe you were even telling me about this, but there was a guy that was on Lex Fridman's podcast that was talking about how like his whole goal is he believes that like as he looks deeper and deeper into the way the world works, that he can simplify like the rules of how it works more and more, and he's trying to like simplify all of reality into an equation that if you ran this equation would spring forth this. And like he thinks that he can figure out the equation for how reality works because there's similarities in like how things grow and like when things split, when things like branch off. And I think that idea is really interesting. And I bet that just like astrology, there's a lot of, like most astrology that we've heard in our lives is based on very little and should not be taken very seriously. But we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater because there is some really interesting stuff. And it's not all bogus.
Right.
There's something to be learned there. What I wanted to share was, it was a passage from J.D. Salinger, and he wrote, what's the rabbit book? Thank you. Yeah, he wrote that book.
When Evan says something, you got to repeat it.
Catcher in the Rye.
Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Smite.
J.D. Smite. He was a Smiteful man.
What was the name?
Of J.D. Salinger.
J.G. Wentworth.
J.D.
What did
Salamander.
What did Evan say?
He said, looks like a lizard. He said he looks like a lizard.
No, it sounds like a lizard.
Oh, okay.
Don't repeat what he said.
No.
Doesn't matter.
Anyway, he also wrote a series of really popular short stories for The New Yorker. And the series of short stories, it surrounds a family that ran like a radio show. And so there's 3 or 4 siblings, and they're all kind of just involved in this radio show. And so they're like a family of actors and entertainers kind of thing. And this story, this comes from a story where one character is feeling really low and feeling disconnected from the world and feeling like everybody's just obsessed with ego and fake and just feeling like not really having a place in the world. It seems like she's going through something like a spiritual emergency, that kind of thing. And this is a conversation between, it's either two sisters or a sister and a brother. They had an older brother named Seymour who had killed himself a couple years before, and he kind of comes up in what they talk about. And this part's a little long, but I read it like 3 or 4 times because it made me emotional. I really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I remember about the 5th time I ever came on Wise Child. Oh, so this is a phone call between these two, but they're in the same apartment, so they can like see each other through glass, but like one like won't let anyone else into the room, so they're like looking at each other through glass.
Okay.
I remember about the 5th time I ever came on Wise Child. I subbed for Walt a few times before he was in a cast. Remember when he was in a cast? Anyway, I started bitching one night before the broadcast. Seymour had told me to shine my shoes just as I was going out the door with Walker. I was furious. The studio audience were all morons. The announcer was a moron. The sponsors were morons, and I just damn well wasn't going to shine my shoes for them, I told Seymour. I said they couldn't see them anyway where we sat. He said to shine them anyway. He said to shine them for the fat lady. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, but he had a very Seymour look on his face, and so I did it. He never did tell me who the fat lady was, but I shined my shoes for the fat lady every time I ever went on the air again. All the years you and I were on the program together, if you remember, I don't think I missed more than just a couple of times. This terribly clear picture of the fat lady formed in my mind. I had her sitting on the porch all day, swatting flies, with her radio going full blast from morning till night. I figured the heat was terrible, and she probably had cancer, and I don't know. Anyway, it seemed goddamn clear why Seymour wanted me to shine my shoes when I went on the air. It made sense. Franny was standing. She had taken her hand away from her face to hold the phone with 2 hands. He told me too, she said into the phone. He told me to be funny for the fat lady once. She released her one hand from the phone and placed it very briefly on the crown of her head, then went back to holding the phone with both hands. I didn't ever picture her on a porch, but with very thick legs, very veiny. I had her in an awful wicker chair. She had cancer too, though, and she had the radio going full blast all day. Mine did too. Yes. All right, let me tell you something more now, buddy. Are you listening? Franny, looking extremely tense, nodded. I don't care where an actor acts. It can be in a summer stock. It can be over a radio. It can be over television. It can be in a goddamn Broadway theater, complete with the most fashionable, most well-fed, most sunburned-looking audience you can imagine. But I'll tell you a terrible secret. Are you listening to me? There isn't anyone out there who isn't Seymour's fat lady. That includes your Professor Tupper, buddy, and all his goddamn cousins by the dozens. There isn't anyone anywhere that isn't Seymour's fat lady. Don't you know that? Don't you know that goddamn secret yet? And don't you know, listen to me now, don't you know who that fat lady is? Ah, buddy, it's Christ himself, buddy. For joy, apparently, it was all Franny could do to hold the phone, even with both hands. I really like that.
Wow.
And I've thought about that scene a few times since reading it the first time, because it's like everything is important, that like anything you're doing with even one person matters.
Yeah.
And like when I've been at work, sometimes I put more effort now into like trying to make the other person happy, and like even if it means kind of being a little silly or something, like
Yeah.
be willing to, like if we're all part of the same thing, if we are all God, and I think that there's a chance that that's true, then like it doesn't matter who your audience is or how many people or like what is even going on at the moment. Like
Yeah.
that entertaining the other people is important, or uplifting other people is important, and being present is important, and doing your best like matters.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot.
That's dope.
Yeah. And there was one more thing I wanted to share that was kind of along the same lines. It's a similar quote from a Shakespeare play called The Tempest. And I don't know totally the context of who's saying this, but our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air. And like baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yes, all which it inherit, shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. So Shakespeare very much believed, like he's popularly quoted as saying, all the world's a stage, that like he believes that we are in some kind of play and that we are all playing our roles and we're all acting out the story and that none of this is really real and we'll all realize that eventually. And that was something that he put into some of his work, that that's how he felt about what was going on. So there were some really interesting quotes about religious ideas that I find interesting in that chapter in particular, and probably would have been the chapter that you liked the most because there was so much of like that kind of stuff in it.
That's funny how when you slack off and get lazy,
Right.
you miss the best part.
Right.
Yep, that's how it goes.
That kind of covers that chapter. There was one more chapter after
Now,
that.
which chapter is that? So I can go back and read just that one.
7.
Still be a lazy bastard.
7.
7, cool.
Yeah. And then there is one more chapter that's kind of the conclusion chapter. And parts of it are unfortunate because he goes on a really long time where he's like explaining, now obviously what you're going to ask me next is, so what happens next? Or like, what's going to happen in the future? You got any predictions kind of thing? And he goes over, like, because he's been researching this for 20, 30 years, something like that. So he goes over some kind of past examples of like, well, I saw leading up to this point that there was these two archetypes that I expected would show themselves in some way. And he kind of goes over that, like, yeah, in some cases I kind of knew. But the thing is, like, even though I know that these two personalities are going to be present, I don't know what they're going to do exactly. And afterwards, when you look at it, you can go, oh, yeah, they totally would do that. Of course they'd do that. But he doesn't always know going into it. And so he went over a lot of examples like that. One notable one is that he noted that there was some sort of alignment from 2000 to 2004. And he did expect that there would be some sort of, Saturn was involved, so he expected there to be some sort of encroaching, or I actually wrote it down here. Saturn is contraction, conservatism, limitation, that there would be something that would cause people to become more conservative. And the sort of, 9/11 was definitely a big part of what he was seeing. And he mentions that when he saw 9/11 happen, he was still shocked, but he and the rest of the astrologers all knew, like, that, like, oh, we know what personality caused this to happen. They like understood, although they didn't predict 9/11 was going to happen exactly, they
Right.
knew that something was going to happen. And, after 2001, did we go to Iraq in 03 or 04? 03. So we go to Iraq within that period too.
This guy's incredible.
He's good at history. So that happened within that same period as well. And yeah, so he felt that was pretty predictable, but he didn't know exactly what it was going to be. And then he goes over like some alignments that are coming up soon. But this book came out in 2007, so it's
God damn it. Well, so how close was he then? Did he say anything that turned out to be resonant with what happened?
I didn't analyze it deeply enough because that would take really quite a bit of research in order to figure out, like, I don't know enough about history to have analyzed it correctly. So
Yeah.
maybe I don't really know, but a lot of that information is like even the back end was like 2017. That was like the latest conjunction or like alignment.
Amber Alert, huh?
Oh, I got one of those earlier.
I got one there too.
Was that your first one today?
You used to see a black Lexus did something sketchy in Yakima. No fucking way.
I think that's the same one I saw.
Yeah.
So we should probably cut this because we need to go look for that car.
Yeah, we need to go to Yakima and find this Lexus.
Let's get out there.
I wonder if it said what kind of rims it had on it.
Some interesting takeaways from this last part was that he discussed how he obviously gets that it's that for most people like him that are reasonable scholars, this is going to be really hard to swallow. That like the idea that there is any sort of relationship between the cosmos and the psyche is ridiculous. And he said something that I thought was interesting, that like he's think about it, how could cosmos, the most outer thing, have anything to do with psyche, which is the most inner thing you can think of? And that was an interesting idea.
Wow.
And but I guess that goes along with like the as above, so below thing that we've kind of discussed earlier in the
Right.
book. That like there's layers to existence, something like that, and things affect other layers of it. And there's some amount of rhyming,
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
You know what's interesting? As above, so below is in the Lord's Prayer in my favorite translation of the Bible, which is the Message by Eugene Peterson.
That's interesting.
But in the typical translation, it's something like, "Make the earth like the king, like your character, like
Yeah.
form the character of our world in the image of the character of your world."
It's like something like as on earth as it is in heaven,
Yes, exactly.
something like that.
Yeah, and in the Message it says, "As above, so below." Like, I wonder if he put that in there because he has a mystical bent or whatever you call it, and so he wanted it to say something kind of mysticky, or
I don't know the
if he
origin of that
just,
phrase. That might even be a biblical phrase already. I don't know.
I highly doubt it.
Maybe.
Haven't you read the whole thing?
I don't remember.
Do you remember that
You read
dialogue?
it in like Mormon James though, didn't you?
No, I read the King James version.
That's what I meant.
But
I just meant that only Mormons still read the King James, but there is actually a
Yeah.
lot of traditional Christians that do, but
it's the only true version.
Roman hill. I was hanging out with one of those Mormon missionaries a couple weeks ago because I was picking up a children's Book of Mormon from her because because they gave me a Book of Mormon. I was like, I want to read this. I want to understand what this says. And I started reading. It's like, God, this is boring because I'm so pampered by modern contemporary translations of Scripture.
Yeah.
Like, guys, I don't, what do you want from me? Like, do you have a contemporary translation? They're like, no, we don't believe in messing with the Word of God, da da da. I'm like, okay, do you have a children's Book of Mormon? They're like, actually, yeah, it's pretty cool. So I was picking up a children's
That's
Book
kind
of Mormon
of
for them.
I mean, that's like
I know, right?
What?
You can only do it, whatever. The places, we draw lines, places, and there's reasons. And so, anyway, I was like, man, this is cool. I just really wish, I really wish there was a contemporary translation of the Book of Mormon. Nobody's done one, even one that's not approved by the church. No, never. I'm like, that's a bummer. She's like, yeah, why not just change it? It's not like it's the Word of God or anything. Like, she made this like really snotty comment like that, and I was like, doesn't matter if it's the Word of God if you can't understand it. she's like, I guess I see your point, but like, I used to hang out with those missionaries, right? But there was one really cool one, and low key I had a crush on her, but actually we had like really cool spiritual conversations. She was really open minded, and we just talk about God. Her mission ended, and all the rest of them are brats. So anyway, I went way off track.
That's okay.
As above, so below.
As above, so below, inner, outer, it's all the same thing, baby. And something I liked a lot that he said about like what the takeaway that what he takes away from this, that time is not only quantitative, it's also qualitative. That like there is that different times, that this time that we're existing in right now has a quality to it. And it's not the same as the time from a few minutes ago. That like different things, because of the personalities that are pushing on us, if that's how you want it, that's how I like to personify it, although it's not necessarily exactly like that. Because of the personalities that are pushing upon us, time has different quality, and certain times are better for doing certain things. And time isn't just time. Time is pretty variable.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea.
Yeah, that's cool.
He also
Right, because different spaces, have different qualities. It kind of feels Roman in Rome. It feels Irish in Ireland. That's a normal concept.
Yeah.
So that's pretty fascinating to think that we would start thinking about time that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, time, time and space feel like, if you start thinking about them really deeply, they're pretty similar ideas. That like it's just more space, but stretched out in a direction we can't actually visibly think about, but it's just more space stretched out in a different way, in a different dimension that we can't really think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there's also qualities that space has that we, or no, that time has that we need to realize space has. Because we just realized that space has a certain quality that, quality is not the right word. Space has a certain characteristic that we now realize time also has. We being you and I.
Mhm.
Space has the characteristic that in different parts of space, it has different character and personality. Now we realize the same for time. In different parts of time, it has different character and personality. I wonder what things about time we need to realize also apply to space as well.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah. Like if you do start viewing, I guess if you want to go down this path that I'm kind of saying, that like maybe time is just more space in a different way, then you do, I guess if you want to start going down that path, then you need to look at, well, like, does that all match? Like, do they have the same kind of qualities? Can they have the same qualities, or do they work relatively the same? There's something to think about there for sure. Yeah. He also brought up again the two suitors metaphor that was like from chapter 2, which I really liked when it was brought up. You remember what I'm talking about?
No.
It was the idea, a suitor is a man who is trying to get a woman's hand in marriage, or is trying to court a woman. So the two suitors metaphor was about, think about these two different suitors that are trying to like woo this woman. One of them, genuinely wants to understand everything about her and is like seeking to understand her, while the other is just trying to figure out mechanistically, what things do I have to say to get what I want from her, and which one would you be more likely to go for? And the answer, of course, is the one that actually seeks to understand you and respects you.
Right.
And he sort of transfers that to, now think about two different people that are trying to understand or trying to get something from reality or understand reality. One of them that's viewing it as just a mechanistic thing that has no intelligence to it, and wants to figure out, what things do I have to do to get what I want out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is thinking, this is smart and I want to understand it, and I want a relationship with it, and I want like a mutual relationship with this.
Yeah.
That is the more likely path towards understanding reality more fully, is if you respect reality, not think that you are someone that can conquer it.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought up that like going forward, he feels like that's what we need, that like that's what humanity needs, is to have a better understanding that there is intelligence to the way that this stuff works, to the way that the world works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just what you think it is. Because there is evidence that the sky lines up with what happens here. It seems to imply that there is something intelligent to design, and intelligent to the way it all works.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do in order to I get the sense that he feels we're on a bad track, that he feels that we're heading to a bad place, and that he feels we need to redirect and stop acting like the bad suitor and start acting like the good suitor that
Right.
wants to respect and understand the universe.
Yeah, that would seem a fair assessment to me.
Yeah.
But it also seems to me that when you see a new example of evidence that the world is structured and orderly on a level that implies it was created by something intentional and intelligent and loving and creative and all that and good, it's tempting. It's tempting to think, well, this might change people's minds, but well, yeah, but just until people get used to that information,
Yeah.
the process of evolution, that everything just seems to fall together in a way that makes everything gradually better over time, to me also on a philosophical level implies creationism. But because we're used to that information, we take it for
Right.
granted. It's just like, well, that's just the way that things are, because we already
Right.
know that. It's like, but when you discover something new, and this is true for me too, evolution doesn't immediately, for me it does, because I like contemplating evolution in God, so it's a bad example, but like, the fact that my DNA is complex and structured on a level that's so far beyond comprehensible to me, but works so efficiently.
Mhm.
Every single day I can rely on it all to work, and it's trillions of things I can't understand. That doesn't make me think about God. That doesn't make me go, wow, isn't God good?
Sure.
Didn't something intelligent have to do with the creation of all of this?
Right.
Because I've heard it before.
Mhm.
But when I hear this, I'm like, proof of God. The cosmos do the same thing as us. And it's like, yeah, until I get used to that information.
Yeah.
And then I'll just
That's
go,
totally true.
nah, that's just how it works. And then, so, but hopefully that's the ebb and flow that we go through. We learn new information that inspires us. Like, just like Isaac Newton wouldn't have made the discoveries about physics that he did without the understanding of the fact that we're made in the image of God and reality is structured and we can figure reality out because it's a fair game, so we should play it, and it's a structured game so we can understand it. And if we record what happens, it'll keep happening. We trust this. There's a lot of God implication in that. So it's like we go through periods like that where we're like, let's pursue the knowledge of God, and we make these revelations and we go, we're just kind of used to all that, and then a new thing happens.
Right.
So I really do think that the general public, it's like when you realize that psychedelics are more than we thought, or astrology was more than we thought, or religion is more than we thought, or any weird subject, or aliens are more real than you thought, it opens you up to everything.
Yeah.
So
Totally
it
does.
just gets the ball rolling in a good direction. I do think that this work that he's done could help spark that. But it's like eventually we're gonna get bored of that shit too.
True.
We're gonna get ungrateful, bored, and spiritually dead with that information too, right?
That's why
When
you gotta hear about another book every week. Keep looking
Right.
for more. Keep looking for more hits.
Right.
Yeah. And I wasn't actually gonna read this part, except you brought up Newton, so now it feels like I should.
Sweet.
This was, as John Maynard Keynes observed in a paper written for the Royal Society celebrations of the Newton Tercentenary, which I assume means 10 or 1,000 years. Tercentenary? I don't know. Newton should perhaps be more accurately regarded not as the first of the age of reason, but as the last of the magicians, the last of the Babylonians and Sumerians. And so this is someone discussing Newton's views, this next part. He looked on the whole universe and all that is in it as a riddle, and as a secret which could be read by applying pure thought to a certain evidence, certain mystic clues which God had laid about the world to allow a sort of philosopher's treasure hunt to the esoteric brotherhood. He believed these clues were to be found partly in the evidence of the heavens and in the constitution of elements, but also partly in certain papers and traditions handed down by the brethren in an unbroken chain back to the original cryptic revelation in Babylonia. He did read the riddle of the heavens, and he believed that by the same powers of his introspective imagination, he would read the riddle of the Godhead, the riddle of past and future events divinely foreordained, the riddle of the elements and their constitution from an original undifferentiated first matter, the riddle of health and immortality. All would be revealed to him if only he could persevere to the end. It's really cool.
That's really, really interesting.
It's a really good like truth seeker excerpt about Newton and about how like he is so viewed as the father of science for like understanding gravity, but like he wasn't doing that. It's sort of like been retconned into being like he was seeking to understand the mechanistic universe, when the truth is that he was seeking to understand God.
Right.
And he was seeking to understand the rules that God laid out.
Yeah.
And those two things are very similar. It's just how you kind of look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's whether you're thinking about your relation to reality in an intuitive way or in a descriptive and objective way. I really want to read Maps of Meaning so that I can articulate stuff like this better, because that's what it's about. Is
And sorry, what's Maps of Meaning?
Maps of Meaning. It's by, I can't remember who. It's about how your left and right brain operate differently, and how there's a realm of intuition and religion and mythology and a realm of objective fact and data. And so it's just like you can speak intuitively and say, my goal is to understand the mind of God, as Albert Einstein said, or you can speak objectively and say, my goal is to collect enough information and interpret it effectively enough that I understand things better than I do now in the future. Like, you can describe it in an objective way or an intuitive way, but it seems like people have forgotten the value of thinking about intuition as something genuine and useful.
Mm-hmm.
And Jung said the most misunderstood thing about his teaching was that he regards the psyche as real. And I love that because like being a person who's experienced psychosis, like you can tell somebody something that you experience psychologically and they tell you it's not real. It's like, how do you know this conversation's real? Because you're experiencing it.
Mhm.
I experienced what happened in my head. So
Right.
what is this definition of real? Is it that we only think things are real if they're healthy? Or is it that we only want to believe things are real if we can grasp them so that we can play God over them? And the things that we can't grasp, we want to say, we want to deny the existence of.
Yeah, I
Because
think it's that.
and it's just arrogant and bullheaded and it's not useful. And I think those ideas have to be challenged for us to understand psychology better. Like, how do we validate the experiences that people are having psychically or mentally, and understand them? Like, so I feel like a lot of modern scientists, people who are currently in modern scientific fields,
Sure.
would talk to Newton and be like, "This guy's a fucking weirdo."
Yeah.
You know, if he
He's
was
probably
just
far
talking
out.
like that, they just don't understand. He's speaking intuitively about what they're speaking about objectively, but you don't want to think creatively and intuitively if you want to feel like you're the god of all your knowledge, and you want to understand
Right.
everything. You want to play Neil deGrasse Tyson over everything, and if it's outside of your grasp, then it's false, and if it's within your grasp, then it's absolutely correct. And I'll tell you everything about it, and everything I know is everything that there is, and so I know everything. And it just that's not what gets you an Einstein or a Newton.
No.
That's
Yeah.
what gets you a guy like Tyson who's really good at explaining something somebody else came up with.
Right. But we're not
That's
gonna
how you get that.
we're not gonna be like talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson 500 years from now.
because he's not a legendary scientist. He's a legendary interpreter of science, which he's super good at explaining. For him to explain multiple levels of reality and dimensions and shit is super useful. But he's
a
just
good
a
science
translator.
PR guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like a science celebrity. It's like
Exactly.
you're not gonna. It's gonna be Weinstein's ugly ass that figures out the next level of reality. Or
Right.
that crazy Chris guy who's a horse rancher. He has the highest IQ on the planet.
Right. Yeah, that
And
guy.
he's a horse rancher, and one of them crazy motherfuckers is gonna figure out the next thing.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be Neil deGrasse Tyson who thinks ghosts aren't real. Give me a break, dude.
We should do a Neil deGrasse Tyson hate podcast. I'm gonna read all his books. He wrote a book where that'd be funny. He wrote a book where he takes letters that people have written to him and he publishes the letters and then his snarky response to them, and the whole book is just letters and his snarky responses to them.
So he published basically a Facebook page.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's like it's so bullshit because it's like he's doing a thing where he can make it so that no one can respond. Unlike a Facebook page, this is in paper, and you can't tell me that you don't like it.
Right. Right.
So yeah, maybe we
Dude,
should read that and
sent-
respond.
I sent Sarah this hilarious video. I was hoping she would send it to you. It's like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson animated having a conversation. Fuck, I said his name. Animated having a conversation. It was a fake video, but it was like a really funny parody. And Peterson's like, "Well, I know you're very skilled at debating children and have made a great career of it." That's Shapiro and Tyson, though. They're like UFC fighters if they just beat up the audience
Yeah,
and then drew a belt on themselves. It's just so ridiculous.
the fucking guy, the guy who does the change my mind thing. You know what I'm talking about? Crowder.
Yes, Crowder.
Crowder's one of those too.
He's so cringe.
He's the
I
worst.
follow one of the Republican pages that I follow. I follow pages on all different sides. One of the Republican pages that I follow, it's literally Steven Crowder, like, adminning a page that's called Republican Party, and they just, like, share a shitload of Crowder. Chowder?
Crowder.
Why did I forget in the middle of my story?
You thought he might have been named Steven Chowder.
Fuck! So they'll Republican Party on Instagram
Yeah.
post fuck, I almost just said it. They post Steven Crowder content, and then he'll like respond and like be the top comment, and it'll pin his comment
Oh my god.
at the top of the post. And then, oh my god, it's just so fucking cringe. It's like, go find a smart liberal and argue with him, you fucking asshole. I don't want to just watch you masturbate on Instagram.
Or he
It's
goes
so
out in the
annoying.
street and finds the dumbest one that he can goad into an argument with him and then publish it as content.
Because he does mashups. It's like when I did rap battles and then I made a best of video.
Right.
Like it's like only uploading best of videos, like with no rap battles. Like it's like just going out and doing rap battles and then just uploading your best of video.
Yeah.
And then shelving and just hiding the rest of the content.
Exactly.
It's so cringe because he can go out there on the streets, argue with people, and then just be like, God, I look fucking smart here. Oh, I'm gonna post it.
That's what so much like man on the street content is now. Is like, let's go out and find the dumbest person from X group.
Yeah.
And really show X group what, you know.
There's so many Christians doing it. Brave Christian street preacher argues with atheist on the, and it's like some crazy drunk asshole atheist like
Yeah.
arguing with a college kid, and it's just like what? No,
Most people are not ready for whatever fight you've trained for.
people.
It's like a boxer going down the street and being like.
Most people aren't ready for whatever fight you've trained for.
Yeah.
Exactly. Night school.
Yeah, night school.